Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. You know, I had an opportunity to talk to the sheriff again of San Juan County, and it was enlightening. More so just because he's very frank and he's very personable, and if you get to talk to him for any breadth of time, you know, I have a little bit of bias because I've known him for a while. And yeah, I'm sure he has flaws like everybody else, and so you can't please everybody, especially when you have to be a politician to do the job of being a sheriff. But we were talking about his concealed carry. So if you ever see San Juan County Sheriff Shane Ferrari, you know he's armed because he's always on duty. That's part of being a sheriff in New Mexico. It's kind of being a sheriff anywhere. And I had an opportunity to check out what he actually carries. And I was a little surprised because his duty gun is actually a 1911, but his concealed carry when he's trying to be, you know, deep cover, just doing his daily gig, is actually a Glock 43. Now, his is a little tricked out. I mean, he's using base plates that are give it more capacity, but he only has 8 rounds in it. But he has another ammunition source, and he's trained. And he encourages people to get trained in concealed carry. So why is that a topic of conversation? I've had this conversation on this podcast specifically about, you know, the gun in your hand is better than one in your safe. And I have friends that have Glock 19s or have SIGs, any model of SIG, and they don't carry it on them. And that point came up during this conversation is like most gunfights happen within 3 to 25 feet. And what are you going to do in that time frame? And the second ammunition source, the actual carrying of another magazine to feed your gun, that came up because it's not so much that you're going to run out of ammunition, but it's a potential because you carry this gun daily that dust and grime get in the magazine, that it fails. And you need another source of ammunition to carry on the fight and to protect yourself and protect those around you. So I showed him my deep conceal, which is an Ruger LCP Max. It's a 380. And you know what was surprising to hear from him is like, that's actually a really good option. You know, I have a tendency, he said, that weight matters. You know, when you're carrying a gun all the time, it's just like you carrying your knife or your lighter or your wallet. These things add up in weight. And a lot of people quit carrying guns because they buy something that's really big. Case in point, you ever try carrying a SIG P229? I have. I had one. I transferred it to my daughter for her birthday. And the reason why I got rid of it, number one, she loved the gun. And it was one of the first handguns she ever shot that she actually wanted. And it made, it was a special gift to her because it made an impact to her because this was Dad's gun. But she has always wanted a SIG P229 because she's been accurate, whatever. Carrying it in a purse might be a little different than carrying it on your side. But what I found was I carried it for about 2 months after I purchased it to try to see, you know, it is the SEALs gun or the FBI SIG style gun. And what I found is it's all aluminum and it weighed down parts of me. And not to be lazy, but that stuff adds up, and it does cause some bad back issues, especially when you're walking around with this gun. And the same thing can kind of be said for my Glock 19. I have a Glock 19. It is my preferred carry gun if I'm like carrying daily, and I'm not working or doing something like that, because I'm not allowed to carry at work because there's certain places you're just not allowed to carry. When they ban you from carrying, you can't carry your gun there. But the gun that I find that is always on me when I'm not at work or one of these prohibited places, and yes, that's a status thing, you know, the signs tell you not to do this, And it's better to have it than not need it, and not need it than to need it and not have it. I get that. But I'm still trying to follow the law as much as I can, because I don't want to be done up with that type of charge. I don't want to be in the legal system. My whole stance as of late is the less government entanglement I can have, up to and including that I do not work for a government entity anymore. And that was a huge driver, other than, asking me to do stuff that I know was against what should be done, is to not be involved in the government, not to be entangled with it in any way that I have to, other than I still pay taxes because, the IRS is no joke, and they'll go after a little dude before they'll go after a big dude. And I mean that by business sense, not or business case, not actually anyone else, because they know the little dude that doesn't make a lot of money, he can't afford to fight this in court. I still think taxation is theft. But where I'm going with this is that gun that you carry. Do you practice? Do you train with it? And it's great that you have a gun, but is it always in your truck? And why is that? Or why is it always in the safe? Is it because you wanted to check a checky box and say, well, I have a pistol for self-defense, and yeah, I sometimes carry it? Did you bother to get your CCW just to let it not be a thing for you? Did you actually train? Do you train? And train at the lowest common denominator. And what I mean by that is I've told you about this before. I train without my contacts or without my glasses because that could be a situation I'd have to fight in. I've trained in my damn boxers out on the range. Why? Because that could happen inside my home. And this came up during the training classes I went to. And something that one of the guys I mention on here all the time, Sonny Pazikas, has said, is that the odds are you're going to end up in the least opportune time and place and your least advantage possible, and you're going to have to fight. Okay? So are you capable of doing it? But to round back to what I was saying, think about that. So you've got the gun, you got the training, and you don't carry everywhere you can. Why? I mean, the whole purpose of this is to make sure that you're alive, that your family's safe, and that you can protect those around you. That should be the methodology and the mentality you have when it comes to carrying a gun. It's a tool. It's no different than, like I said, your wallet or your keys or anything else. And that's actually how I check myself every day. Do I got my wallet? Do I have my keys? Do I have my gun? Do I have my knife? Do I have my lighter? I don't smoke, but I carry a method of fire in case I ever need it. And more often than not, it's to burn strings off of clothing or something, but I have it. And this is something that's always been trained in my family, is you adopt a daily, my dad had this methodology too. You adopt this kit that you carry with you, that everyday carry stuff. I have one of my good listeners here. He's a knife guy, and he has multiple everyday carry knives. I ask him all the time, did you remember to carry your gun? And the reason why I say that is the world is not getting any kinder, and I say this all the time, and I tell you guys, stay strapped or get clapped. But look at the level of violence that is perpetrated on just political people. And then look at what has happened because of that radicalization. There have been people killed in Oregon and in Washington, one of the two states, just for wearing a red hat. Okay? Just for speaking your mind. And the question comes to mind all the time, could this tragedy be averted by them being armed themselves? Now, there are always those options when you should know this and you train to this level of when to fight, when to run, and when to be a good witness. Because not every one of those situations you're going to get into are you going to be able to make a huge difference, and you're more likely to be a liability. And you have to know your level of skill especially with the firearm you have, and what threat levels you can actually fight to. It sounds funny that I would settle for a 380 because I'm capable of using a 9 or a 45. But the odds are that I'm going to have a close-in fight before I'll have a long-distance fight. And even with that 380, I train out to 50 yards, and I can hit reliably a clay pigeon at 50 yards with a 380. That's because I've learned the holdover for this particular gun, and I train with it. I have over 2,000 rounds through my LCP Max right now. And it's not just, it's a mix of what you would call plinking ammunition and actual, not hand loads, but actual defensive ammunition. I carry Lehigh Defense in that particular gun, and I change my ammunition out, and I train with that to realize the difference in recoil and know how it's going to hit. And the reality is that I have found the perfect training ammo that one of my good friends at Go Rogue Ammunition, he makes, that gives me the same performance with a really cheap load for 380 that does the same job, trajectory, and everything else when I use those Lehigh Defense rounds. And, it works the same way with my 9mm. For a long time, I carried a Glock 26. And what it really changed me to the 380 was summer in New Mexico. I'm not a shorts guy all the time, but sometimes it's so stinking hot that shorts kind of become mandatory, especially on the weekend. And with that, strapping on a Glock 26 or a Glock 19 becomes more of a chore, because not only are you trying to use your belt or putting on a belt period with some shorts becomes a chore. So how am I going to carry something, or what am I going to carry? And my first iteration of this was that I bought a bodyguard. I liked the gun. I hated the trigger. Absolutely despised everything about the bodyguard 1.0 trigger. The next thing I thought of is, let's try an LCP. And I hated that trigger just as bad as I hated the other one. What changed my mind about the so-called mouse guns was the LCP Max. The trigger was dramatically improved compared to the LCP. Its carrying capacity, instead of carrying, 6 rounds or 7 with one in the pipe, now you have one that you can carry 10 or 11 rounds in it, and if you get the extended butt plate or you have that extended magazine, you got 12 or 13 now. You're only 2 rounds away from your Glock 19, and you're right up there with your Glock 26 in my case. And today's 9mm and today's 380 are not what our grandparents and what our parents trained with or shot with. Modern ballistics and modern projectiles produce better outcomes. And when I started looking at the Lehigh Defense, I'll give it up for Mac on Military Arms Channel. I think his name is actually Tim. He showed several iterations using ballistics gel what the 380 Lehigh Defense Extreme Defense does. And me being a guy that has to see it myself, I calibrated or made my own ballistics gel. You can do this. There's plenty of recipes online. I'm not going to go through those. And I tested it with some old jeans, because the calibration test for FBI media is it has to be at a certain density. You have to shoot it with a pellet gun to verify that. It has to be at a certain temperature. And they use 2 sheets of denim, because what they're testing for is, with hollow points specifically, that denim fills that void and doesn't always open up. And what I found with the Lehigh Defense was that it didn't need to open up. And it was exactly what Tim showed in the Military Arms Channel ballistic stuff that he showed with that Extreme Defense round. That makes it a compelling round to use for self-defense, because now you're getting the necessary penetration, you're getting the necessary damage out of a 380. Yes, the rounds are expensive. They're almost $40, and they may be more than that now. And I haven't bought any this year, so I'd have to double check that. But they're for 20 or 25. I don't even remember how the count is. That's been a while since I bought some. That doesn't mean I don't buy them. It means it's time for me to buy some, so I'll buy 4 boxes so that I can train with 2 and swap out my my carry ammunition. So I'll have 2 magazines in addition to that I can actually train with, and I will use the other boxes to refill and top off my magazines that I use for that. Now, do you need to change out your ammunition? No. This is something that I do because I believe in the old boomer wives' tale that sometimes ammunition goes south. I've had hang fires with rifle rounds before that have been on the shelf for 2 or 3 years. I've never seen a pistol cartridge, a defensive cartridge, in my personal experience, have a hang fire, especially a manufactured one. I've had some that I have made, which I would attribute to a gun that had light primer strikes. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of the Springfield series anymore, or ever. My experience to Springfield, sample size of 1 was the XDS, and it was a lemon. Do I believe Springfield makes good guns? Absolutely. Do I believe in them anymore? Not with the anti-gun stuff that they've done just to perpetrate their brand and keep themselves afloat, which is a shame because their new VHS rifle, their bullpup, is very compelling, and I know they don't make it. It's made in Slovakia, and it's actually a Slovakian military gun, I believe, or something like that. That's compelling to me, but I will never support Springfield again because, 1, their customer service sucked dealing with. 2, they threatened me with a lawsuit if I kept talking about them. And 3, the turnaround time to get something very well fixed was totally outside of the realm for me. I have bought Glocks since then, and I have never looked back. When I started concealed carrying, I had a 1911 lightweight officer's model, the last model year that Colt was still in the United States and that they had made it. I still have the gun. And I was afraid of damaging it, so I wanted it, because I was raised around boomer FUDs, that the 45 was the ideal carry round. And after I had that experience with the 45, I still carried another 45, another 1911 to be exact. And I went through, no, actually I was still carrying the XDS before I'd started having any more issues. I went to my first actual CCW concealed carry class. And here I am carrying 4 magazines and watching guys go through a course of fire carrying 2, but only using 1. And they were using Glocks, SIGs, and Smith & Wessons. And when I started looking into why that was probably the direction to go, I was noticing that their groups were tighter, they could get more rounds on target, and they had more rounds in reserve if they needed it. And that started my wheels turning towards Glock. And why don't I have a Glock 43 or one of their little guns, the 42 and a 380 capacity? When SIG came out with the SIG P365, the only reason why I don't have a P365 is because of cost right now. Having been unemployed for, a year-ish in that little time frame where I was working but not making as much money as I am now, that became an issue. And that's about when the 365 became palatable for me to buy, period. So I stuck with what I had. The minute I got a little bit of money that I could squirrel away, I went and looked at the P365, and I almost bought it. But then when I saw the LCP Max, that became the gun. And it was because of its size, its diminutive size. And I don't care what other influencers on the web have said, I've shot mine enough to know that the gun does not have any recoil. So much so that I've taken it and let the kid's mother, who is gotten into concealed carry because of me, and we're not together anymore, she went and shot it, and she said the same thing. This kicks less than my Bursa that I carry every day. And I said, I know. That's why I like it. So I've heard of one or two different people saying the recoil on it was mighty, and it's not the case, even with that defensive ammunition. I have not had that experience. And as far as reliability, for me to carry a gun, I have to have at least 350 rounds on its clock before I feel like I can trust it. And that's because of that issue I had with that one gun in the past, is I want to know that it's going to work all the time. And about 350 rounds is when that gun started making malfunctioning and having those issues. Now my Glock 26, I don't know how many rounds I have on it, to be honest. It is the gun that I have, the pistol anyway. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That has the most rounds on it. The rifle that has the most rounds naturally is an AK for me on it. And it's between my Wasser and between my Arsenal SLR 106 or whatever it is, the FR 106. It's the 5.56 AK. And it still maintains groups for you, those of you guys that want to know how long an AK will last. It's usually at the 100,000 rounds that you'll start seeing the groups open up. But back to pistols. My pistols, I train with them. You know, the whole purpose of me getting a concealed carry and going through 6 or 8 classes now, not just to renew it, but to become better. I've been through multiple training sessions with different people because I want to get better at this. This isn't something, yes, it's a hobby, but if I'm going to do this and be serious about it, that's how far I've taken it. The same thing goes with loads. When it comes to 9mm, I prefer 124 grain gold dot from is it Sierra or Spear? I think it's Spear. That's my preferred round. The training ammunition I use is from Go Rogue. Their 124 grain does the same stuff in the 9mm. The 380 that Go Rogue makes mirrors Lehigh Defense's performance target-wise that I've seen. I have not taken extended shots past 50 yards. And the 50-yard shots I do with the 380, I will be honest, I have hit 4-inch discs or clay pigeons at it. But no, the average group is enough to put a man-sized target down, and that's good enough for me with that 380. Now my 9mm, I can continuously hit headshots with it because it's got more capability, ballistic capability, and it's got a longer barrel, which is going to add to that accuracy. But I love that conversation with Shane because the man has been in the business of law enforcement where he's actually had to rely on his gun for safety. And for me to see it, because he took his suit jacket off, and I looked down and he's like, "What you checking out?" And I said, "Your gun. I wanted to know what you're carrying." I knew he was carrying. And he goes, "Oh, this is my Glock 43. And he told me about it and showed me all the fun stuff. And, that's it. He's a gun guy just like I am. He is a very pro 2A guy. And most of us guys that are in the 2A are kind of that way when we have those conversations. We perk up and we start talking about guns because this is what we know. And this is part of our life. This is part of, as Coleon Noir says, the pew-pew life. So I would highly encourage you, size your gun to your need. You're going to hear all kinds of badass stuff. You're going to see people say you need John Wick's HK to be effective. The reality is you're not. And you can add red dots if you like, and you can make it as badass as you want. But is that really making you a better shooter? And all those things you add to that gun add weight. And if you're leaving the gun behind because you're tired of carrying it, there's no shame in that. Just look at the options that are on the table. We live in 2024 nowadays, And they continually are making newer and better guns. Case in point, I told you my issue with the Bodyguard 380. The Bodyguard 380 2.0 acts as an improvement to the LCP Max. And had I not had the LCP Max already and didn't see the need to go ahead and buy this, I would look at Smith & Wesson because to me it's slightly better brand. Now Ruger, I have no shame in pulling Ruger, but I'll tell you this: Smith & Wesson, their finishes on their guns are better. They have a melanite finish that where Ruger does bluing, and the reason why they do that is cost. Rugers are priced at a certain point, and Smith & Wesson does the same thing, but they always improve on their finish and their grips and their stempling and everything else. Will I buy a Bodyguard? No, because I'm committed to that. If I'm going to keep a gun, keep it in service, I'm going to use it until I don't see the usefulness of it anymore. And in this case, if I were to buy a Bodyguard, it'd probably be as a gift to someone else. And you can still do that in New Mexico. You just probably have to go do a background check. And luckily enough, right now I have two people in the firearms industry. My buddy Chris, who owns Liberty Gun Works, I believe is what it's called, and Go Rogue. And both of them will happily get you in anything you want. And they'll do the background check for like $25, $30, depends on cost of living nowadays, because they have to make a little bit of money to do the time, because it's going to take them time to do the background check, because that's stupid. But anyway, I digress. Size your gun to you, man, and size it to the season. Wintertime, I like bigger jackets. I carry a bigger gun where I can. Think about how you carry. Think about how you live your life. Size it around what you wear, what you do. They make a gun nowadays for it, guaranteed. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.